They expected an exit with drama, a slammed door, a message, a final line they could quote later in anger. But you didn't give them any of that. You left like a ghost. No echo, no warning, no explanation. And now they replay everything, looking for signs they missed, clinging to moments you already buried. That's what silence does. It haunts, not because it's empty, but because it forces them to fill it. And the louder their mind gets, the more they realize they never really understood you. They mistook your stillness for softness, your patience for weakness, your quiet for consent. But you weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because they weren't worth the breath. Now they're stuck in the space you left behind, talking to shadows, competing with ghosts, building entire conversations in their heads just to feel close to the presence you took with you. And you're not even looking back. They thought your absence would be temporary, that you'd come back, that silence was a pause, not an ending. But the longer it stretched, the heavier it became. They started checking their messages more often, rereading old conversations, searching for clues in things you said or didn't say, because silence has a way of turning every memory into a mirror. And they don't like what's staring back. People fear silence when they can't control the meaning of it. They wanted you to fight, to argue, to leave traces they could twist. But you left nothing, and that nothing is louder than anything you could have said. Because silence doesn't fade. It echoes, it sharpens over time, and now it follows them into their thoughts, into their dreams, into every room they can't fill with noise. They used to think they knew who you were, but your silence ruined that illusion. Now, every version of you they imagine is stronger than the one they remember. More distant, more powerful, less reachable. You became myth, not memory. And the more they try to pull you back into their narrative, the more you slip out of reach. Because silence isn't weakness, it's erasure with precision. And some ghosts are better at haunting than hiding. They start to talk about you again, not publicly, just in passing, a name mentioned under breath, a glance exchanged when a memory hits too hard. But it's never just a memory, it's weight, it's regret, disguised as casual mention. Because deep down they know your silence wasn't avoidance, it was awareness. You saw through the noise, and instead of feeding it, you walked away. And here's the truth they won't say out loud. They needed your chaos to make sense of their own. Your presence gave them a distraction, someone to analyze, someone to provoke. But when you disappeared, they were left with the one thing they couldn't control, themselves. And that's when the obsession started. Not with you, but with the version of themselves that only existed in your shadow. You became the missing piece in a story they can't finish. They keep wondering what you'd say, what you'd do, how you'd react, because now they realize your reactions were the only honest ones in the room. You weren't loud, but you were real, and realness doesn't fade when it leaves. It stains. Your silence didn't make you invisible. It made you unforgettable. And now they're stuck building noise around a void that won't speak back. They try to recreate your presence, not because they miss you, but because they can't stand the hole you left. It's not grief, It's irritation wrapped in longing. They mimic the way you used to sit. They echo your words in conversations you'll never hear. They analyze every interaction, every look, every pause you ever gave them, searching for a reason. But the truth is too cold to accept. You left not because something broke, but because nothing ever mattered enough to hold you. That's what eats at them. The indifference, not rage, not heartbreak, just the clean cut of detachment. They expected damage, fallout, emotional debris they could cling to, but you gave them none. No closure, no warnings, no parting gift, just absence. And absence, when done right, becomes a mirror, showing them how little power they actually had. Now they watch others like you walk through their life, hoping to find a replacement. But copies don't carry silence the same way. Copies crave attention. You didn't. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't stay to justify anything. And that makes you untouchable. You became a reminder that their grip on you was never real, just assumed. Every time they speak your name now, they lower their voice, not out of fear, out of respect. Even if they don't admit it, they know they lost to someone who never raised their voice, never needed to. The way you vanished wasn't escape. It was control, clean, calculated, deliberate. They thought silence was your weakness. Now they pray for just one word, but you're done speaking. They thought time would dull it, that memories fade if ignored long enough. But silence doesn't age. It rots, it spreads, it infects every unfinished sentence, every unresolved feeling, every question that was never answered. And now the silence you left is louder than ever. It's not a moment anymore. It's an atmosphere. They try to move on, post pictures, make noise, find new people to fill the vacuum, but nothing sticks. Because no one else brings that stillness that made them feel exposed. You didn't just leave the room, you stole the air. Now everything feels thinner, faker, louder than it should. They laugh harder, they talk more. But deep down, they're not performing for the world. They're performing for the ghost of someone who never clapped. They scroll through old messages, pausing at the last one you sent. Not because it was profound, but because it was final. No goodbye, no sign off. Just the sudden stop of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. That's the difference. You didn't leave in confusion. You left in command. And now they see it. They never had a hold on you. Not emotionally, not mentally, not even for a second. You were just watching, measuring, waiting for the exact moment to disappear without a trace, and take their sense of control with you. They talk louder now, hoping the noise will drown the echo you left behind. But they forget, you don't outshout silence, you survive it. If you're still watching, they already lost. Subscribe and stay unreadable. They started copying your silence, but it didn't work. Because silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of something heavier. You weren't just quiet, you were intentional. When you stopped speaking, the room didn't get calmer, it got colder. And now, no matter how much they try to mimic that stillness, it collapses under its own weight. Because it's not just about shutting up, it's about knowing when nothing is the loudest thing in the room. They thought silence was passive, but you made it surgical. You used it to cut ties, shift power, erase people without touching them. And now, the more they try to make noise, the more they reveal what you always knew. They were never in control, just loud. What hurts them isn't that you left, it's that you didn't flinch. No rage, no message, no sign that they even mattered. And that silence became the proof they never wanted. Because if someone leaves without a word, it means they were already gone long before they moved. You were done with them while they were still rehearsing what to say. They study you now like a problem to solve. Try to decode your stillness. Rewind every moment for signs of the exit you never advertised. But you weren't hiding, you were just finished. And you made peace with the fallout long before they even noticed the floor cracking. Now they try to rebuild their version of you, louder, pettier, desperate to be seen. But copies scream, originals vanish. That's the difference. You didn't need to be louder, you needed to be gone. Fully, quietly, clean. And that's what they can't replicate. Not your silence, your certainty. It starts to eat at them, quietly, not in public, not where others can see, but when it's dark, when no one's around. That's when the silence gets the loudest. They start dreaming about you. But it's not memories, it's versions of you they made up. Stronger, sharper, colder. They don't remember your voice anymore, just the lack of it. And that's the thing, they're not haunted by what you said, they're haunted by what you didn't. By the words you held back, the judgment you never gave. The goodbye that never came. That silence now wraps around everything they do. Every move they make feels watched, measured, condemned, without a single word. They overcompensate, brag louder, post more, try to shine in places you're no longer looking. But the harder they try, the more obvious it becomes. They're not building anything, they're reacting to a ghost. You didn't block them, you didn't call them out, you just vanished. And they're still answering questions you never asked. That's the fracture. They thought your silence was void, but it's full of intent, of control, of judgment they'll never escape. You became the unseen mirror they can't break. They look into it and see everything you saw before you left. All the weakness, all the noise, all the desperation. Now their life has a rhythm. Perform, overthink, collapse, repeat. Not because you cursed them, but because you removed the only person who saw through the mask and said nothing. They don't fear your voice. They fear your silence will never end. By now, they've stopped trying to replace you, not because they found peace, but because they realized the silence isn't something you left behind. It's something you took with you. You didn't abandon them. You extracted yourself like a surgeon removing a tumor, precise, clean, and final. And now everything they touch feels off, like something's missing, something they can't recreate because it was never theirs to begin with. They used to define you by how close you stood. Now they define you by how far you are. That distance, it burns, not like fire, like frost. Slow, quiet, killing nerves before they notice they're numb. They're not angry anymore. They're cold, hollow, because silence doesn't just echo, it replaces. And now they see what you always knew. Connection doesn't mean access. You were never theirs, just near, just quiet enough to be mistaken for close. But you were already gone, long before you left. That's what they couldn't understand. You didn't drift, you decided. They try to rewrite it now, tell stories where they left first, where they outgrew you. But every lie leaves a trail, and every trail leads back to one truth they can't outrun. You ended it without needing to say it. No closure, no speech, just the final move of someone who never saw them as a threat. You didn't fight for space, you erased the battlefield. And that's why the silence still haunts them. Not because it hurts, because it never begged to be heard. They stopped mentioning your name, not out of peace, out of fear, because by now your silence isn't just something that happened, it's something that's here. It lingers, it watches, it waits, like a shadow they didn't notice until they turned the lights off. Every decision they make now runs through a filter they can't name. Would you have approved? Would you have laughed? Would you even care? They don't say it out loud. But it's there, in hesitation, in rewrites, in that 1 second pause before they speak. You don't haunt them because you left. You haunt them because you never explained why. And that silence, they filled it with stories, whole narratives where they were the victim, where you were cruel, detached, cold, and maybe you were, but you were also done. And that's what they can't process. You didn't react. You didn't rage. You didn't need to. You walked away with nothing to prove, and that's what made it permanent. Now, everything reminds them of you, not the person, the absence, the standard, the stillness that exposed everything fake around them. You didn't ruin their life, you just showed them what it actually looked like without distraction. And that's a scar that doesn't bleed, it just stays. They don't want you back, they want back the version of themselves that didn't flinch at your silence. But it's too late. You took that version with you, they won't admit it. But now everything they do is shaped around a presence that no longer exists. You became the baseline, not because you stayed, but because you left right. No scene, no message, no weakness, just silence with intent. The kind that doesn't need to come back to be felt. They thought forgetting would be a choice, but the mind doesn't let go of what it doesn't understand. And you didn't leave a story, you left a void. No reasons, no narrative, just space. And space, left unchecked, becomes obsession. They watch others with your quiet, Study people who remind them of the stillness they couldn't break. But it's never the same, because what made your silence different wasn't that it was empty, it was accurate. It said what they couldn't admit, that nothing they did was enough to keep you, and now they live in response. Every boundary they try to draw, every connection they chase, every word they speak, it's all shadowboxing with someone who isn't even in the room. They aren't trying to forget you, they're trying to become the kind of person you'd never leave without a word, but they never will be. That window closed the moment you decided to disappear, not in anger, but in clarity. You didn't just leave, you ended their access, not to your time, to your silence. Now they know. Silence doesn't mean you're not watching, it means you saw everything and walked away anyway.